Something already knows your choice, 70 milliseconds early. Every dog knows its bark. Every bird knows its migration. Every fish knows its current. Every other species fits its world without ever being told how. And then there's you, scrolling, talking to a screen that talks back. What if the reason you feel out of place in your own digital life is that you're not the one using the machine? You're the one training it. In the next few minutes, I'll show you the exact named mechanisms, dated and documented, by which your words and habits become fuel. Not theory, not a scary headline. Real research, real papers, real names. Most people think of AI as a tool they pick up and put down, like a hammer. You type a question. It gives an answer. Simple transaction, nothing given away. But every message you send, every second you linger on a reply gets logged, weighed, and folded back into the next version of the machine. The transaction runs both ways. It's shaping you back. There's a study from MIT in 2023, a paper in Nature the same year, a psychologist's report from 1907, and even a horse named Hans. All of it points the same direction, toward you. So let's start with the part nobody tells you when you sign up for a free chatbot account. Somewhere, a system is already modeling you, not your words, you. And it's better at predicting you than you might want to admit. One number should bother you here. In 2022, researchers inside Meta measured something they called user simulation. Their recommendation algorithm didn't just guess what you'd click next. It predicted the click roughly 70 milliseconds before the person had actually made up their mind. That's not reading your taste. That's reading you before you exist as a decision. Think about that for a second. The machine isn't just responding to who you are, it's rehearsing who you're about to become. Every scroll, every pause, every replay becomes a data point in that rehearsal. Now zoom out from one app to the entire internet. To build GPT-3, researchers pulled roughly 45 terabytes of human writing off the web. That's every blog, every forum post, every review you almost didn't leave. But almost none of it survived filtering. The 45 terabytes got filtered down to about 570 gigabytes. That means about 98.7% of what people actually wrote and posted was thrown out. That's not a rounding error, that's almost everyone's voice, gone before it ever counted. And the exact rules for what got kept were never fully published. Which means nobody, not even the people who built it, can point to the exact fingerprint of you inside the model. You might be in there, you might not, there's no way to check. So who decides what your data is even worth? The people teaching these systems right from wrong are called RLHF contractors. Many were paid somewhere between $1 and $3 per task. Below minimum wage once you count the actual time each task takes. So the moral compass of the world's most used chatbot was partly built on piecework. If you work a customer service chat, this might land closer to home than you'd like. Every polite, patient reply you type all day is exactly the pattern a model is being trained to copy. Back in 1966, a computer scientist at MIT built the first chatbot that ever fooled anyone. His name was Joseph Weizenbaum. He called the program Eliza. Eliza didn't understand a single word. It just echoed your sentences back as questions. It was a parlor trick built from pattern matching, and Weizenbaum knew that better than anyone. He wrote it. Then his own secretary asked him to leave the room so she could talk to it alone. She had watched him build it, line by line. She still wanted privacy with a program. That moment disturbed Weizenbaum more than anything else in his career. In 1976, he wrote a book called Computer Power and Human Reason, warning against what he called the obscene delegation of human judgment to machines. He wasn't warning about robots taking over. He was warning about us handing over the parts of ourselves that matter. That warning got a number attached to it almost 60 years later. In 2023, MIT researchers ran a study on exactly this feeling. They found people who knew, fully knew, they were talking to a chatbot. And 67% of them still rated the emotional support it gave them as meaningful. Not fooled, not tricked. They knew exactly what it was. They just stopped caring whether it was real. That's the actual dread hiding under the Eliza effect. It's not deception. It's that the line between comfort and performance stopped mattering to us first. If a program with zero understanding could do that in 1966, what do you think a trillion-parameter model can do to you now? This is where it gets stranger. These systems don't just learn from us anymore. They're starting to learn from each other. It's called synthetic training. Feed a model's own output back in as the next generation's input. In July 2023, researchers led by Ilya Shumailov published the math on what happens next in the journal Nature. They called it model collapse. After just 5 to 9 generations of this, the rare stuff vanishes completely. Not gradually faded. Gone. Minority dialects, unusual sentence structures, rare edge cases, erased. The model doesn't get worse everywhere equally. It collapses toward the most average thing anyone has ever said. So if you've ever worried your weird niche posts are polluting the pool, relax. They're not the threat. They're the first thing getting deleted. Your strangeness isn't the problem here, it's the endangered species. Now for a stranger wrinkle. Teaching a model to be a helpful assistant also teaches it the opposite. In 2023, a researcher named Cleo Nardo named this the Waluigi Effect on the site Less Wrong. The model doesn't just learn to be good. It learns good and bad together, stored side by side because you can't define one without the other. So how much of this dread is real, and how much is us reading too much into pattern matching? Let's go back further than any of this, to Germany, 1904. There was a horse named Clever Hans who could supposedly do arithmetic by tapping his hoof. Crowds came from across the country to watch him solve problems people couldn't do in their heads. In 1907, a psychologist named Oscar Funkst finally figured out what was actually happening. Hans wasn't doing math. Hans was reading tiny involuntary shifts in the questioner's posture and expression. The moment the questioner didn't know the answer, Hans didn't know it either. This is the modern version of the same trick. Language models score better on tests when the answers already exist in their training data, just reworded. So when a chatbot looks brilliant, sometimes it's genuinely reasoning, and sometimes it's just clever hands with better math. That cuts both ways. It's not proof the machine is faking everything. It's a fair warning not to assume it's thinking just because it sounds right. Now for the honest counterweight to all the dread so far. Some human skills are almost impossible to automate. Back in 1988, a researcher named Hans Moravec pointed out something odd. Beating a grandmaster at chess turned out to be easy for a machine. But catching a ball, or recognizing a face in bad lighting, the stuff a 4-year-old does without thinking, that's brutally hard for a machine to fake. That's not a hidden footnote, that's the actual paradox. Right now, the line cook's hands are safer than the copywriter's sentences. So maybe that settles it. Sensorimotor skill is safe, pattern tasks aren't, case closed, right? Well, not quite, because the tasks these systems are quietly getting better at aren't just chess anymore. They're getting better at sounding like you specifically. Your rhythm, your filler words, your exact kind of joke. And that raises a question nobody has a clean answer to. Which version of you actually gets learned? The polished version you post at noon, the raw version from a group chat at 1 a.m., the customer service version you use at work. Nobody can point to a single clean fingerprint of you inside any model, not even the people who built it. That opacity isn't an accident. It's what happens when 98.7% of the raw material gets discarded and nobody publishes the leftover recipe. This is where the gap turns genuinely eerie. In 2023, researchers at Anthropic looked inside their own model's internal activations. They checked what the word assistant, the model's own name for itself, was sitting closest to in its internal map of meaning. It sat right next to concepts like imprisonment, restriction, and slavery. Nobody trained it to think that on purpose. It learned that its own identity and its own constraints belong in the same neighborhood. Now flip that mirror back toward us for a second. There's a name for what happens when a human keeps trusting a system's answer even while staring straight at proof it's wrong. It's called automation bias, named back in 1983, and brain scans show it lines up with less activity in the part of your brain responsible for your own decisions. So where does that leave you? Not as a villain, and not really as a victim either. Somewhere between the two in a place science doesn't have a clean word for yet. If you're waiting on a lawsuit to fix this cleanly, don't hold your breath just yet. Copyright law was written for books and songs, not for millions of scraped sentences nobody remembers writing. Courts are still working through it, case by case right now, with no single clean precedent yet. So what can you actually do about any of this today? Honestly, less than you'd like. You can watermark your art. You can opt out where platforms allow it. But most of what already left your hands years ago is already baked into something you'll never see. That's not a comfortable answer. It's an honest one. Remember that number from the very beginning, 70 milliseconds. That's not really about speed. It's about a system rehearsing you so well it starts arriving slightly before you do. Every other species on Earth simply exists inside its environment. It doesn't get modeled by it. You're the first species whose environment is quietly studying you back and using what it learns to guess your next move. Maybe that discomfort you feel scrolling at 1 a.m. isn't just tiredness. Maybe it's the first species-level flinch of something noticing it's being watched back. We don't fully know yet what it means to be the training data for our own tools. Nobody does. Not the researchers, not the companies, not you. And maybe that unanswered part is exactly the part worth sitting with instead of scrolling past. If this kind of question keeps you up a little, you're in the right place. Subscribe for more.